Welcome to the Law, Your Money, and You. I'm Roberta Sapphire, an attorney in Sharon.
And I'm Camille Barron, a financial organizer, also here in Sharon. And Roberta, once again, we've had requests for a repeat performance because people were just so interested in what our guest, who's with us today, had to say the last time he was here.
Yes, we didn't finish, and we said another time, and now this is the other time. We are so happy to welcome Stewart Hirsch, and he's also from Sharon, but most of his work is out of state, right?
That's
and he
right,
talked about strategic relationships,
That's right.
right?
You want to reintroduce yourself in case somebody missed the first time?
Sure, I'm not sure where you want to start. I'm a recovering lawyer. I practiced law somewhere in the range of 20 years before I saw the light. And somewhere along the way, I was both in firms and I was in-house in a company, local company here in the area, Hills Department Stores. And I was laid off before they filed for Chapter 11, and I went back as a contractor, and I built a contract lawyering business for a number of very large companies in the area. And somewhere along the way, I was working for TJX and Staples and Welch's and a bunch of companies, and then somewhere along the way, I realized I liked getting business more than I liked doing work.
My husband quoted you the other day. He said he loved getting the business, but he didn't want to do the work.
Yeah, so it became a lot more fun to get the business, and I realized that a lot of the lawyers and then other professionals really didn't understand a lot of the things that were necessary to get business. So finally I gave away my big secrets. And
Be yourself, care, and show that you care.
Well,
We quote you all the time.
that's
and
some
a
of
lot
them.
of people out there quote you.
really, well, the big secrets that I gave away at that time were be nice to people,
Oh, be nice.
care about them, and show that you care. Those are the three big ones. And they're so simple, and yet for some, so hard.
Yeah.
And-
Now, where we left off was you had brought some books with you, and we were going to go into some of these books that would help people
Sure.
in the caring and showing that they care.
And I brought some back.
Yeah, and also you had written us that you were just appointed editor. What was it?
That would be that you've just given me quite a promotion. I am a columnist for Inside Counsel magazine, which is designed for in-house counsel in companies. And so I write a monthly column on talent development. And the most recent column I wrote was called Executive Presence, We Know It When We See It, which is where people really need to understand how to develop and get executive presence. It's this amorphous thing that nobody really understands. And so I wrote a column about that. I talked to some people and then developed the column and wrote it. And then I've written just four other columns, and have another one I'm submitting probably today for them. One was the general counsel's worst practices. So the bad things that general counsel do, ways to really mess up. And that became one of the top.
See if we do them.
Oh gosh, it's funny. I don't remember all of them. I haven't looked at it in a while.
Just one or two.
One or two.
You
What is the
know,
general
just
counsel's
one.
the worst practice of general counsel? It's really around not being transparent.
Oh, yes, of
You know,
course.
just coming out and being honest and completely clear. It's really for a lot of people.
So is that the
fits.
fault, coming out and being
Well,
honest?
no. Being honest is a good thing. Being transparent.
Being too opaque is not.
Transparency is a major theme in a lot of things.
Well, today
that,
especially, with all the things
yeah.
that happen today, financial services, law, everything we require. Otherwise, you don't have the trust, and you need that trust.
And that's actually, I brought the trusted advisor with me, which might be something that you would find interesting.
Yes.
Charlie Green, and there are three authors, David Maister, Charlie Green, and Rob Galford. And I met Charlie through networking.
I think you talked about him.
Yeah, and The Trusted Advisor is a fabulous book. It was written in the year 2000. There are two books since then, Trust-Based Selling and the Trusted Advisor Field Book. And these books all talk about some models for developing trust. And there are really three basic models that people can use to develop trust. And it's something everybody can use for all purposes. It's in the Trusted Advisor organization, we look at it from a business perspective, but it applies to everything. Charlie hired me to be his coach many years ago. That's how I got to know him. And then he asked me to lead the coaching practice for Trusted Advisor Associates, and I've written a number of blogs on the Trusted Advisor site. So trustedadvisor.com is a great place to go to learn some of these skills. So the three models are: there's a trust equation. So there's actually an equation to determine how trustworthy you are.
Interesting.
Oh, is that what it's?
Yes,
So
and there's a
it's
free
hard to-
assessment on the site. There's also a paid
Really?
version of that assessment, but you can assess how trustworthy you are based on the 4 criteria.
Which are?
So trustworthiness equals, so you if you have one side of the equation is T, the other side is it's an equation. So you have a numerator and a denominator. Right? The numerator's on the top.
Yeah.
It's C plus R plus I. The C is credibility. The R is reliability, and the I is intimacy. Okay, and so that's the denominator. So credibility is about the words we use. It's like someone is credible because I believe they're credible because they have the credentials. They have the things that they need to have that show that they are someone that's credible. Reliable is someone that does what they say they're going to do. And most professional services people rely almost entirely on credibility and reliability. That's the one that they go with the most. The intimacy, the third factor is one of the most important ones, because the intimacy is about discretion. I trust her with my secrets because I know she's not going to tell anybody. Right? So if you have someone that's credible and reliable but really low on intimacy, you might not really tell them you're not going to tell them the information they need to be able to help you. And think of a doctor. If the doctor is just doing a great job in terms of being credible, like great diplomas on the wall, and they show up on time for appointments, and that's always an issue. And but they don't really seem to care about you. You might not tell them what's really going on, and or you might not comply when they want compliance with the whatever it is that the treatments are.
I would. No, go ahead.
Well,
I'm
the other
sorry.
part's the denominator, right? So
Yeah,
when you have an equation, right, what's the denominator do to the numerator? This is math. It divides
It divides it
into
up,
it.
yeah.
Right?
Oh, it
Right? Very
divides
simple, right?
into it. Yeah, that makes sense.
So if you're giving numbers to the numerator and denominator, you want the denominator to be low and the numerator to be high if you want a high trust factor. So the denominator is S, which is self-orientation. Okay, so you want self-orientation to be low. And self-orientation is your motivation. So imagine you're with somebody and maybe a salesperson, and if what they're really trying to do is sell you something, then already their motivation is about them and not about you. Now, if the salesperson's motivation is about you, it would be trying to help you get the thing that you want and that you need. And it's more important that you get what you need than that person get the sale. Then you know that their self-orientation is low, and you're going to trust them more. So if their credibility and their reliability is high, and their intimacy is high, and their self-orientation is low, their trustworthy factor is pretty high.
Sure.
You know,
So that's
that-
the first of the 3
That's
models.
excellent.
That's good. I think that this would go over good with engineers and that field, whereas
Engineers, lawyers, consultants, anyone in the professional services. The organization goes into some very big companies
Yeah.
and shares this stuff with role play exercises and lots of things to help people really develop these skills. I teach one class at Emerson College for graduate students where I go in one day and do a trusted advisor program.
I was going to say this would be good at the school level, because I've been an attorney many years, and I remember even when I worked for a lawyer there, the main thing is this is confidential. You're taught that you have to be confidential.
Right, and that's
And
discretion.
it just stays with you. It just stays with you, and I would assume, and that's good that you mentioned Emerson, which is a wonderful school, but that's good that they have that right while they're still in
Right.
school.
Yeah, so we do. I mean, they do programs all over the world with this. There are some people teaching this in other countries, and I do the coaching for this all over the U.S. and in some other countries as well. And that's just one of the models. There's 2 other models, which is
wonderful.
creating trust conversations, and more importantly, there's 4 trust principles, and And the principles are really important. The principles are, and you can do this in everyday life. Start from the other person's perspective. You know, don't think about it from where you come from. Think about it from where the other person comes from. There's, we all know the golden rule, do unto others. There's now a book that's called the Platinum Rule, which is do unto others as they would have them do unto themselves.
Yeah,
Yes.
but there's another one. Do unto others before they do it to you.
Yes.
But no, that's it. You should treat people as they want to be treated, not as you want to be treated,
Right, so
because
you look at it-
everybody's different.
But you look at it
That's
from
good.
their perspective. The second one is
You're wonderful, Stewart. Isn't he wonderful? Yeah,
Yes, he
it's
is.
Great.
the second one is this focus on the medium to the long term. So when you go into the store and you're buying something, that's transactional. You're just doing things in a one-time opportunity. But if you're developing a relationship where you're going to have to come back and visit with the person again and again, you have to focus on the medium to long term. So when you go to buy a car, for example, most of the time, at least stereotypically, the car salespeople are transactional. They're trying to get the sale, and they don't really care if they ever see you again. But I've seen some ads lately from some car places that are saying, we want you as a customer for life. So we're going to treat you in the medium to long term. They don't say it in those words, but that's what they mean. We're going to look at this as a long-term relationship because you're going to keep coming back. And you treat people differently when you think it's a real relationship than when you're just trying to get something out of them.
And that's funny. He's right again, because when I bought a car for the big car, a lot of money, 2 weeks later when I went back, the salesman didn't even know. I didn't remember who the salesman was. He didn't remember us
Really?
at all. No recollection whatsoever.
Right, so that may have been you were treated transactionally and not as
Yeah.
a relationship. The third of the principles is, excuse me, the third of the principles is collaborate. You have to learn to collaborate with people as opposed to compete with them. I mean, sometimes in law firms, the lawyers compete with each other for business for things. If we collaborate rather than compete, if we collaborate and help each other, that develops trust. And sometimes, so what I do, like when I'm doing a proposal, I just did a proposal for a large law firm to do a program. Instead of giving them a program and saying, here, say yes or no, I said, let me give you a proposal, it'll be a draft, and we'll work on it together.
Good.
So I started it and then gave us something to work from, but the rest was we were working on it together because they had to buy in. They had to make
Sure.
sure they were bought into the concept. So from a trust perspective, you want to collaborate with people. And one of the things, which is why, one of the things that got me into doing a lot of work with women, which we've talked about, is that women tend to collaborate more as a gender. There just seems, I don't know, I'm not going to go into the whys or the wheres, but there seems to be a much greater degree of collaboration that happens from the female perspective. And there's actually a book that talks about that difference works, which I can share with you. And then the last one is the last of the 4 trust principles is to be transparent. You have to be really open. Transparency and the honesty really opens it up and builds trustworthiness. And there's a lot more in trust-based selling and the Trust Advisor Field book and in this book that talks about these principles in the blogs and in the articles. There's a lot of articles, a lot of free stuff online that if people are interested in learning more about being trustworthy, there's plenty of resources available. And this is just one book. There's one of 3, and then there's others that talk about trust as well.
I have a question. You use the word transparency, and I'm thinking of transparent, like when something's transparent, you can see through it.
Yeah.
Is-
And that's really true. There's no difference between what I say and what I mean.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that's
Yeah.
transparency. There's a clarity and a sense of I'm not trying to tell you one thing and do something else. There's also in business, if people are transparent about the things that are important to them, they're going to make better deals. They're going to do things in a better way. So if one business is willing to share why something's important to them, then it's going to be more likely that they're going to be able to get what they want, or at least the other side will understand and share what's important to them, and then they can all get to yes, which is what the book Getting to Yes is all about.
Sure. You had mentioned about some of the characteristics that distinguish men from women in terms of their style.
Yeah.
One of the books that has been quite popular in the past year or so, Lean In
Yeah.
with Sheryl Sandberg's.
Yeah, I actually brought Lean In.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
You
Yes.
talked about that.
yeah. This is a fascinating book. I'm actually more interested in different works at this point because everyone knows about Lean In.
Sure.
Lean
But what do you
In-
think with some of the tenets that she makes?
Oh, I
that-
think she's right on the target.
you think
I
so?
think she's on the target in so many things. I mean,
Well, what is her book about? Because I remember from the last time, but for our guests out there.
Well, it's gotten a lot of press. Lean In is about the need for women to actually to step forward and to not be afraid to be themselves, and it involves simple things like negotiating. Women tend to not negotiate for a higher salary. She told her story when she was negotiating at Facebook to be this chief operating officer. He made a really reasonable offer, and she was going to accept it. And actually, I don't remember what happened, but I think her husband told her,
husband
"Go get
said,
more,"
don't-
right?
Yeah,
Right.
he
You read
said,
that?
Don't accept it right away.
Yeah.
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 And she tells a story about and the greatest Lean In story I read in there is the one where a woman comes to her and says, "I want to talk with you because I'm going to have a baby." And she got all excited. "Oh, great! Let's see what this means for your future." And she says, "So, when are you due?" She says, "Well, I'm not pregnant yet." She says, "So, then when are you planning to have the baby?" "Well, soon." And I said, "Well, are you married? Are you in a relationship?" And she says, "Well, not yet, but I don't want to do certain things because this is going to happen." So it's basically she gave up before she started.
Yes.
And
You should have said, "You've got to be kidding."
it is definitely you've got to be kidding, and she did, and she said, why are women doing this? And we're different, and there's Caroline Turner, who I just love this book. You have to hear about this one if you have a moment.
Sure, I'd
Go
love to
Have
hear
you
right
about
this
it.
one?
ahead. Difference works.
Difference works. Caroline Turner was the general counsel of Coors, as in the beer company. And I met her not too long ago. She and I did a program together. I was asked to do a program about her book at the Women Influence and Power and Law Conference in Washington in October. And I said, I'm not going to stand up there by myself. So I called Caroline and said, "Would you do this with me?" I said, "I love your book." I said, "I'm asked to do this. I don't want to do it by myself. I think you should be doing this program." So she invited me to do it with her, and we did it together. So Caroline wrote a book about the masculine-feminine continuum, that there are a number of qualities and traits that men and women have, and we're going to say stereotypical men and stereotypical women. We're on different parts of the scale, but we're all on the continuum somewhere. And so the areas that she spends her energy on, there's like 10 areas: how we structure things, our work style, our work focus, so like how we influence how we talk. So in how we talk, she might say, "What's the most natural and comfortable for you when you're speaking?" How we view relationships, how we handle conflict, how we use humor, how we use power, and how we approach ethics. So she has these charts. I just want to show you this chart. Okay, about how men and women do things differently. So I just opened this page. I have no idea what's on this page yet. This is a how we view relationships page.
Is that her
This is all her.
perspective or
Well,
her
what she says
research?
is research, a lot of research,
really?
a lot of research, anecdotal stuff as well as there's a list of books in the back of the book here.
Oh,
That is
yeah.
list of
Oh,
books in the
boy.
back here. Goes into things like Gail Evans was one of the first to write. Deborah Tannen wrote one of the
yes.
first books. Gail Evans, who was the senior vice president or executive vice president of CNN, very high up at CNN, wrote "Play Like a Man, Win Like a Woman" in the early 2000s,
I like
and
that
that was
title.
a fabulous book. There were other ones. Women Don't Ask, and then the follow-up to that, Ask for It. And so here's what she says: the feminine behavior, masculine perspective on how we view relationships. Just an example. When Fran, she has two characters, Fran and Max. Fran being the stereotypical woman, Max being the stereotypical man. So when Fran expects deep personal relationships at work, she sees it as making work more comfortable. Max sees it as being touchy-feely or naive. So, and if he's the boss, he might give her soft assignments. And if he's a subordinate, he might misread her signals and avoid her or create distance. When she softens critical feedback to avoid hurt, when she softens critical feedback to avoid hurt feelings, women will do this more than men will. She sees as protecting the relationship and being considerate. Max sees it as lacking decisiveness and not being honest. And if he's the boss, he's not going to give her tough people assignments. And if he's a subordinate, he's going to think she's soft. So then he goes on and says masculine, and this is just tons of stuff in here. When a Max hesitates to share feelings, he sees it as it's appropriate for the workplace, a form of self-protection, staying cool under pressure. But Fran sees it as unfeeling and inauthentic, unavailable and shallow. So we have these different, like he plays hardball to get a point across. You know how men will do that. It seems like they're doing that. He says being tough and using the game to bring the best out in the players. But she sees it as being insensitive and uncaring and putting winning over the best solution. So if we don't understand how each other thinks, how can we have a really strong workplace?
Right.
And how can we understand each other in personal relationships? And so she takes all these areas and writes them up. And I've spent hours with her on the phone talking
really?
about this and just really learning about, you know, her
How do you
thinking
resolve
process.
something like that?
Well, she has another character she calls the sage. She's now calling it
Wise person.
Fraxwise. She has another term for it. Basically, if he hesitates to share feelings and she sees it and he sees it in different ways, the sage would say in the book, says, count on him to stay objective and unemotional. So put someone that is like that in a situation where you need someone who's unemotional. Put someone like Fran, who is expects to have deep personal relationship. She value the trust. She creates a lot of trust. So value that trust.
Does she have different types of personalities? How many does she have?
Oh, she talks about 10 different areas.
10?
Not different personality types.
Oh.
It's we're all human, right? And we all have all this in us. So I can be more Fran or more Max. I'm actually more Fran. I have more of those qualities, and Caroline is more Max. She has more of the masculine qualities, but we're on the same continuum. So there are times when I have to, in business, may have to act more like Max, and that's hard for me. And there are times. So we did this program together at this Women Influence and Power in Law conference, and there were women there who were. There was over about 150 women in the room, and many of them are general counsel, soon to be general counsel, and very high up, let's say, partners in law firms. And most of them exhibited and talked about how they had more Max behavior than Fran, and it was
That's
learned.
nice.
To some extent, it was learned. Some extent, it was natural. You know, it just depends on each person. But in the environment that they worked in, they had to be a certain way. And we all have to adapt to our environments. But this book and some of these skill sets that she describes helps us
Yeah,
figure out how to do that.
That's something that I know I've experienced when I worked in big companies, that, and I see it all the time, even on TV and everything. Sometimes women who are successful, who will reach the top, have gotten there because they've had to act more like men, and it's unfortunate. Because,
Right.
as you're saying,
you're saying.
why not be able to use your own qualities and still be successful? If the organization is savvy enough to recognize that and appreciate it, they'll be able to use the best of what everyone
Right.
has to offer. What
And
percentage
it's
of
changing.
companies do you think now is that way, recognizes that?
It's a relatively small percentage. I mean, Caroline's
Really?
going into a number of companies, and she's doing her programs. Charlie and that group, and me sometimes from a coaching perspective is going to a number of programs to teach the trusted advisor stuff. These skills are being taught around the world. So and younger people are better at it than people that have been brought up a certain way in companies. You know, more male-dominated corporations. Well, if we're brought up in that, we're going to be more that way.
Can you cultivate those qualities?
Yes.
If you're more one or the other, if you're
Absolutely.
further on the spectrum,
Absolutely.
can you cultivate it? And you have to go into
Fascinating.
you have
Yeah.
to get out of your comfort zone to
Yes.
do that.
We
right?
actually practiced that. We did a practice session with the women at the Women Influence and Power and
wow.
Law Conference where we had them role play the other
Yeah,
role.
the
We had them play
role play.
one way and then we had them
Oh,
play the other
interesting.
way using the same facts to see how it worked out. It was very hard for people to do it, but once they did it, they realized they could do it.
You know, the role playing, that goes for any industry.
It does, absolutely.
Law, catering, serving food,
So
anything.
there's one more arrow.
No,
you
no,
might
we're going
wanna
to
do the
still
arrow.
go. I just want you to know that this is on its way. You've got
Well,
to be kidding, and I
well,
think you've got some.
You
and
you
you'll
might
say to
ex-
me,
you
"You've got
actually
to be
like this
kidding."
book. This is a book called The Empress Has No Clothes.
Oh, you've got to be kidding!
I knew you'd say that. And what's the name of the
The
original
Emperor's
story?
New Clothes.
The Emperor's New Clothes. So this is
Oh,
this
the
is by
Empress.
Joyce Roche. Now Joyce Roche was was president of CEO of Girls Inc. She was also She was also the first African American senior executive at Avon. Years ago, she was the head of marketing and became the global marketing director. She sits on the board of AT&T, Tupperware, Pepsi, and a fourth company, which I don't recall which it is, but there's 4 companies that she sits on the board of. And I met her. She spoke at a conference that I was at, and she's going to be speaking at one that I'm going to be at in a couple of weeks. This book is about something that a lot of people have. Women tend to have it more than men, but men have it too, called the imposter syndrome. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that, you know what that is? Right? So that's
No, I don't. What's the,
that's,
I mean, I can imagine, but
that's where we think people are going to find out we really don't know what we're talking about.
Oh.
So, so there was a time when I felt that I didn't, that I was going to get caught working for all these big companies, and they were going to find out I really didn't know anything. So I went to see the general counsel of one of these companies. I won't say which one, but it was very big. And I said, you know, we became good friends, and I said, you know, I was afraid that someday you'd find out I really don't know what I'm doing. And he said, oh, you have the imposter syndrome.
Oh, is that
and
funny?
That's what it's called. And he said, and I have it too.
But you do
who
know
knows?
what you're doing.
Well, you know, apparently there's certain types of people who have that, and Joyce had it. She described the CEO of AT&T in here,
Really?
who also talked with her about that. And it's all in the book.
Possible to have it and not know that you have it? Not be aware
No, you
of
know.
it?
Well, you wouldn't know what
Really?
you might not know. It's the imposter syndrome, but if you think people are going to find out that you really don't know what you're doing, that's the imposter syndrome. You probably don't have that. No.
Definitely not.
But she described some people, and I think she was talking about I think one of them was CEO of AT&T, who gave her something on it. There was a number of very famous people that she's interviewed in this book.
Are they more men than women who have imposter syndrome?
Seem to be, as I recall, more women than men, but it is not. It is not gender. I don't think it's gender based. But she described it, and she spoke for quite a while about this, and different ways to get around it. But I know we're pretty much out of time, so I won't be able to get into that. But interesting stuff.
You are one of the most fascinating, interesting people that I know. I have to say, I have a syndrome that people don't really believe I know as much as I know. So what I do is,
That would be the imposter syndrome.
No, before I say anything or tell anybody that this is something, I usually say if I'm in my own head 100% sure, I'll tell the people I'm 95% sure. I could be wrong. And if I'm 120% sure and I no doubt about it, I'll say that too.
Yeah, there's a little section on that in Caroline's book.
Oh, good.
Well, maybe we'll have you back for yet a third visit,
well,
because it's very interesting how you can distill a lot of what's out there into these simple concepts, but very, very interesting spin on it.
So that's it.
Yes, unfortunately.
Believe.
So
Okay,
again,
goes.
we hope that our viewers
nice to
enjoyed having
be
Stewart
back.
come back to visit us. And let us hear from you. If you'd like to have him come back again, we'll be happy to. Because remember, this is your show. The law, your money,
And you.